Welcome to Measurably Better Learning, the podcast built for learning and development professionals. Whether you're an instructional designer, L&D professional, or corporate leader, get ready for insights and ideas that will transform your approach to learning, training, and development. So let's dive in. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Measurably Better Learning podcast. And today's topic, Miriam, kind of makes me chuckle a little bit.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
It feels really old.
It does feel really old.
Like, are we still talking
Circa
about
2000?
Yeah, like we're still talking about blended learning.
Mm-hmm.
But we still need to talk about blended learning. I mean, there's new technologies, there's new techniques, there's all sorts of options we have available to us, and nowhere is anybody saying that true, instructor-led in-person training or BILT is going away. So I'm just going to start with a question. Define this for us. What is blended learning in the year 2025?
Yeah, I mean, all right, so I will get to your question, I promise, but blended learning,
the basic.
It's a little, no. Blended learning in 2000 was largely in the education sphere, K-12, because we had a captive audience. And so we could do things like classroom-based things and then send them home and let them do some online stuff before they came back, or, that sort of thing. So today, in 2025, I mean, I think in a really good way, what we have the ability to do is to blend that in-person when it fits with online or e-learning or micro-learning, or I would just call it digital, right? A podcast, a YouTube video, whatever it might be. But to pull those together, but use the right deliverable in the right situation. And so, yeah, it's not anything really new, but I think post-pandemic, we're 5-ish years out.
Yeah.
Like, we're seeing a good return to what I would like to say is, like, to me, blended learning is the best form of learning that we can provide for our learners.
Yeah. I agree. I've always loved the sort of the, pre-engagement, pre-learning, learning, post-learning. That model to me is really beneficial, because there are times I've sat in person training where I go, I can read.
Yeah, exactly.
Two. You could have just sent
yes,
two.
Please, yes.
Right.
Yes.
I'm gaining knowledge, but not really gaining any insights. And then a chance in person to engage with other people in the reinforcement. So that thing really makes sense. And it's interesting that despite all of the technological advances, we are still talking about the inherent value of in-person training. And what are the reasons for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe it comes down to a worldview we've discussed in the past, but like, we as humans are wired to socialize, some of us more than others and in different ways, but to form that connection. Yeah. And I'll be honest, in some of these situations, we might not have the ability to physically be in the same room with someone, but we do have the ability to virtually still live at the same time, talk with people, interact,
We're
get that feedback in a moment. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. A synchronous moment. Yeah. And I mean, I think there's specific times where we really want to focus on that. And we've talked about this in the past, but, interpersonal skills, and I know we can absolutely talk about using AI to help and things like that, but at the end of the day, there's nothing like sitting down. I mean, I know exactly what training you're talking about. I believe we're in some communications training, and you can take it all in. And we even had like these flip charts and other stuff to put on our desk for later. But then we had to split up and talk to someone. And I remember the first time I was like, like, I couldn't figure out how to say it.
There were moments when, and you took the same training I did different times, but it was part of it was on how to confront somebody.
Yeah.
And we were all cool with the content.
Yep.
It was all
made sense. Yep.
And the first team of 2 people to practice it, the person that had to confront just watching body language had pulled her feet up into the chair, wrapped her arm. She was truly in the fetal position. Never would have happened unless we actually did that live. And here we are. That was probably 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Still remember that moment.
Yep.
Of doing that. So, okay, so building interpersonal skills certainly is a great
Mm-hmm.
case study
Mm-hmm.
for use case for in-person. What else?
Well, I think facilitating difficult conversations, which you already alluded to, and even a part of that, I think, is learning to read cues from people. And we all take things slightly different. But there's a bit of a technique and a mastery to what kind of cues are people giving me with their body language, with their eyes, with their facial expressions.
Right.
And then in those difficult conversations, obviously, it's important to be able to read those, but it's also important to sort of have a plan of how you're going to say things and what happens if they say this versus this, how do they react? But those can be, I mean, those are some very critical conversations in companies. You might have to be letting someone go. There might be some legal issues, and practicing that in person. And I don't think we often do it.
No,
You know?
we don't. And I was looking at software recently where it was how to prep for a job interview.
Mhm.
And so it interviewed me. It asked me to name a company, and I named whatever, some huge company that I was interviewing for whatever job. And it was an AI interaction.
Mhm.
The verbal was there, but it just felt off because I couldn't see a person,
Mhm.
And I think there was a version where there was a person. I'm like, nah, you're not
Right. You're not.
real.
Right.
Yeah, the facial expressions and everything, all of that stuff that your brain just absorbs in and gives you data and information. And it was response. It was like stimulus response
Mhm.
instead of a conversation. How about other things? What other areas should we, where else should we be looking to do this?
Well, I think for myself personally, because I spent some time in the classroom, anytime as a learning and development team or the company determines this is a topic that's of critical importance,
Yeah.
yes, we absolutely can do some online things, but as I'm facilitating that conversation or that training session, I am looking for eye contact.
Yeah.
I'm looking for. I still remember one of our colleagues led a. It was a session, in theory, just to get organized to roll out but these people had not met in person since before COVID. They all got together in a room, and she started and realized immediately. First of all, there was no agreement on anything just by looking at what people were doing. There's arms crossed, there were anger, there was confusion, and she had to pivot just like that to, okay, throw all that out the window.
Yeah.
We got to get on the same page, first of all.
Yeah.
So anytime you have something of critical, I think, kind of high level priority, it's important to do it in person because you can see whether it's in person through a screen or in person physically. That's just the best way to read things.
Okay. All right. Well, when we come back, we'll keep this conversation going.
Imagine a world where every training session, every learning module, and every translated document is aligned with your company's unique goals and global ambitions. Welcome to Ingenuity, where we don't just talk about elevating your corporate learning, we make it happen. At Ingenuity, we understand the heart of your business is its people. That's why we specialize in creating custom learning solutions and translation services that are not just effective, but are designed specifically for your business's global needs. Let us show you how learning cannot be just better, but measurably better, with solutions tailored just for you. Learn more in the description below.
All right, Miriam. So let's talk about we've talked about in person. Let's talk about some of the things, some other of the other modalities that if you're going to blend, you got to have different ingredients. Things like e-learning, micro-learning, and online events and what works where best?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you have knowledge, we talked about this a lot with like your base level objectives, knowledge-based content. That's a great thing to put into e-learning. Any kind. You can make it micro-learning, e-learning, it can be a podcast, although I think it's helpful for people to see on a screen and listen in terms of this. But anytime you have sort of that scaffolding, again, base level knowledge, that's a great use of some kind of digital learning delivery. And then when you want them to apply as we sort of move up, those objectives, like Bloom's, that's where we come together in person.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I think if you have complicated or very technical material, that's a great place to use something online, some e-learning, because people learn at different paces. And some people might need to review. Some people might need to like just pause and
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah. And everybody comes with a different experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
know that as I've gotten older, I read much, much more slowly.
Mm.
And part of that is because so much information is available on like Gallipoli. I gotta know about, right? And I don't know what happened, and I kind of know, but I'm like,
Yep,
okay,
yep.
and so it's fun, and sometimes it takes me 20 minutes to read 3 pages, but it's my choice. There's
Right,
I want to dive more deep.
Right.
I want to understand, and somebody else is going to read that same book, know that cold, and somebody else is going to read that book and not care.
Right.
So yeah. All right. Other factors that you're thinking about as you plan for a blended learning approach, which I think you've said pretty clearly, almost all the time, blended is the right way to go.
If you possibly can. Yeah.
So what other
Yeah.
things do we need to be thinking about?
Well, if you think about your book example of my husband and I have watched a few movies lately where we're like phone in hand and we're like, wait, what was that? And we're
Right.
looking it up,
Yeah.
but
You're nerds.
exactly.
Right.
I know. Yeah. But I think when you're thinking of particularly a global audience of learn, if you're a global company, global learners, you may, if it is, for example, something that's company wide, you may have people who have, maybe a high school level education all the way up through your C-suite who, in theory have, advanced degrees. English may not be their first, and even if you translate, still, so the ability to use e-learning in a way that provides those extra resources. Maybe there's like drop downs where they can get more information if they want, but they don't have to, or linked PDFs, things are translated for them. All of those things are great opportunities to use e-learning really to its fullest extent. While not, like you said, we can be more sophisticated. We can even do branching. Based on prior knowledge and, can they show mastery? We can go further with that. But it gives you the opportunity to not hold people hostage, right? They can move through it as they choose to get the information.
So you laid out a number of different modalities and options. How do you bring that in the last couple minutes with that? Let's talk about how do you what's the process of bringing that all together and how are you making those decisions?
Yeah, so I'd love to say I have like some scintillating solution, but honestly, it comes
Should
down
be a
to
one-pager on there something.
right. It really comes down to good instructional design. So you need to consider your objectives and your audience. So if I know my main goal is, I'm going to do two ends of the spectrum, right? Like basic compliance training that everybody needs to know the facts for, but like I can make a job aid also that can sit on their desk. I'm going to go for simple. I'm going to go for, and it's my audience across the whole company. So simple e-learning and a job aid. We can track it. We're all done. Boom. On the other end, I'm considering my audience, again, my learning objectives. I have a major company initiative. We are completely shifting our vision because we're going into a different market, something like that. The way we approach our clients, our products, then I have a fairly lengthy learning program that I'm building, and I've got situations where we have people discussing in focus groups and some in-person training and facilitation. We have follow-up with e-learning, we might have a podcast from the CEO starting. Those are just examples. But I have to let my learning objectives and my audience really drive how I put, that's like that, put the blend together, so to speak.
And then how do they fit together and where do they go? Because it's not just deciding to use a bunch of them. Sometimes it's in what order.
Right.
And what pieces go first and how and how you introduce something is going to communicate an awful lot about you're going to tell me how much I should value something by how you introduce it.
Absolutely.
So we have to think through. We've done some cool things with AI and in videos just of some executives and talking about the importance of our actual real video.
Yeah, right.
Of why this is important and why it matters and setting a tone for the whole thing and working that in. So, well, good.
Yeah.
Well, Miriam, as always, I've learned much and I appreciate our conversation. And everybody, you'll see you next time. Before we wrap up the show, if you're looking to dive deeper, we've got tons of free downloads, L&D resources, and details about upcoming webinars that you won't want to miss. They're found in the episode description. Plus, if you ever want to chat with either one of us, now's your chance. You can find links in the episode description to connect directly with Miriam or me. We're here to answer your questions and to discuss all things learning and development. And speaking of questions, we love hearing from you. Whether it's a question or a comment or a topic you're curious about, or if you just want to join the conversation, drop us a comment on your favorite social media channel. Your input shapes our shows. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. It's the best way to ensure you never miss out on our latest episode. We're excited to continue to transform learning into a measurable success with you. Until next time.